You know, they say every tractor has a story to tell, and I'm Tractor Zoom's resident old tractor nerd slash storyteller guy. Just pull up a chair. It's story time. So, I'm sure most of you know the story of Steiger. You know, it's one of those great American success stories, how they started building tractors in a barn in the 50s in Minnesota, and it grew from there, and they ended up, becoming a pretty mission-critical part of Case IH. Great story, right? But I'll bet you didn't know how close they actually were to disappearing right off the face of the map in the early 70s, and how without Allis Chalmers, they probably never would have made it through. So let's get into it. Allis had a problem in the late 60s. Everybody else had a four-wheel drive in their lineup, and Allis had tried it once back in 63, 64 with a tractor based on an industrial loader called the TL16, but it basically flopped as a farm tractor. They only built something like 100 of them. And to boot, they ended up having to buy most all of them back and sell them down to the sugarcane growers in Florida and Louisiana because that's where they ended up working the best. The tractor's nickname is the Sugar Babe. So if you ever want to go out and Google it, there's lots of photos and information about it and stories and stuff like that. They don't show up real often for sale. Anyway, Allis kind of walks away with their tail between their legs on that deal, and they didn't really want to do it again because they were busy building out the 7000 series, the small row crop line. Actually, this was even before the small row crop line. This was just back in the 60s. But by the late 60s, dealers were starting to get real frustrated. Everybody else had a four-wheel drive in the line, but they didn't. I mean, it got bad enough that some dealers actually went and picked up versatile dealerships, so they had something to fill the gap for their customers. And Allis can't ignore the problem anymore. They know they have to deal with it. They know they have to address it. But their product team is busy working on the 7000 row crop series that they're going to launch in 73, I think. So they don't exactly have people to put on this to build a clean sheet design, and they don't have the time to do it either. So they start shopping. They start looking for a partner to basically build them a tractor that they can put orange paint on and sell them. And I think this is around 69. So the first company they asked is Steiger, and Steiger turned them down flat. So at the time, Steiger had just rented a plant in Fargo, and they'd moved all their manufacturing there. And they didn't want to deal with, get into an OEM thing. They were fine doing their own thing, and that was that. So Allis moves on. They ask a few more companies. One of them was Mississippi Road Supply, which they built like construction tractors and stuff that ran on dirt pans. And they also asked White. And while they're interested, nothing ends up really materializing out of the deal. And here it is, whatever amount of time later, Allis doesn't have a solution. Meanwhile, though, back in Fargo, there's trouble on the horizon. Cash flow is becoming a real issue, and they've exhausted every line of credit they have. One of their financial advisors, I think it was in 1971, actually told the board of directors point blank, guys, the party's over. You got to get out while you can before this gets any worse. And to take it even a step further, the day Gene Dahl took over as CEO, which I think it was 1971 as well, they took a delivery of a load of cat motors, and they didn't have enough money in the bank to pay for them. Like Gene Dahl, brand new CEO, literally on his first day, has to, shake the money out of his wallet and pay for that load of motors with the cash he had on hand. Like I said, not a good situation. It was bad. So I don't know who calls who first, whether Allis made the phone call, a last-ditch Hail Mary kind of thing, or if Steiger reached out to them. I suspect it was probably Steiger. But sometime in 1971, the two companies get back together. They come back to the table, and they start building, they agree on a plan, and they built the 440. It was basically the same tractor as Steiger's Bearcat, but with a triple nickel Cummins under the hood instead of a 3208 Cat. So it turned out to be a win-win for both companies. Allis finally had something to plug the hole and calm down their dealers while they, put their resources on getting the row crops out the door and then building something in-house, which was the 7580. And Steiger had enough money in the bank to keep the lights on and pay the employees. Now, it didn't get them completely out of the woods. They'd end up in a very similar position about a year later, maybe 2 years later. Coincidentally, right about the time that IH wanted to start building out their line of articulating four-wheel drives. And we all know how that went. That started a good relationship, and things started moving up from there. So that's the Cliff's Notes. That's how Allis helped Steiger stay afloat in the early 70s. So I just published an interesting iron article on the 440, kind of more of a deep dive on our blog last night. And if you're up for it, I'll put the link in the bio. The tractor we use in all the photos is selling on an Almond Vintage Power auction in about 2 weeks, and it's a really nice one. It's out of South Dakota, and it doesn't have any of the typical problems that you'll see in a triple nickel Cummins. So kind of cool. It's really neat to see one that survived and is still running well and is largely really original. So take a look at the article if you want to. The link's in the bio. Thanks.